Today I'm going to tell a Brothers Grimm story. The Grimm brothers, Jacob and Willem, are German, and they have collected and written a lot of folk tales, fairy tales. This one is called Dr. Know-It-All. There was once a poor peasant. All he had in the world was a small bit of woodland, a cart and 2 oxen to pull it. To make money, occasionally he would cut down a tree and sell the wood. Now one day this peasant, Fish, for that was his name, took a load of wood into the village to sell to the doctor. As he stood at the door of the doctor waiting for payment, he could smell the doctor's dinner. Oh, the smell of those juicy vegetables, roast meat, and he could just see a beautifully decorated cake through the gap in the door. If I were a doctor, thought Fish, I could eat that well. When the doctor came with his coin, he twisted and turned his cap in his hand until he had enough courage to ask if perhaps he could learn to be a doctor. Well, why not? Chuckled the doctor. After all, it's very easy. All you need to do is to sell your cart and your oxen and buy yourself a nice set of clothes. Then buy some medicine, some pills, some potions and salts and so on. Get yourself a book. An ABC book, the one with the rooster in, will do well enough. And then, most importantly, get a board and paint "I am Dr. Know-It-All" and hang it above your door. And so Fish went home and did just that. Soon he was stood in his room, dressed in his fine clothes. They were so fine he didn't quite feel like himself. Above his door a freshly painted sign, on his shelves lots of medicine bottles, and on the table an ABC book. He was ready. But day after day, no one came. He just sat in his room doing nothing. And then suddenly a knock came at the door. It was his first customer, a lord no less. Fish stood up. He put on his tall hat and then he took it off again. He pulled out his watch on its chain and then he tucked it back in again, and then he let his customer in. "So," said the rich lord, "you are Dr. Know-It-All." "Yes," said Fish. "I need your help. Someone has stolen my money. I need you to find out where it is and who has stolen it. Will you come to my palace?" "Can my wife Gretel come too?" asked Fish. "Certainly," said the lord. And so they waited for Fish's wife to gather her things together and then went in the lord's carriage. When they got to the lord's palace, it was time for dinner. And so Fish and his wife were shown into a hall and sat down at the table. As the first course was presented, Fish whispered to his wife, "You see, this is the first," meaning this was the first course. But the servant who placed the bowl of soup in front of Fish then quickly ran back to the kitchen. Word had spread through the palace that the lord had brought home a man who knew everything, and he was going to find out who had stolen the money and where it was. "We are undone," exclaimed the servant in the kitchen. "He knows. As I got close to him, he said, 'This is the first.'" You see, the kitchen servants had stolen the money. The second servant went out with the second course, and he tried his very best to look as innocent as he could. But as he presented the plate to Fish, he whispered to his wife, "This is the second." The second servant ran back to the kitchen. The same thing happened with the third servant for the third course. Now, the lord hadn't noticed a thing. He'd been musing on how best to test his guest. "Dr. Know-It-All, if you know everything, then you'll be able to tell me what is under this dish cover," as the fourth servant brought in a dish that was covered. Poor peasant Fish. He looked at the dish cover. He hadn't a clue what was underneath it. Feeling the pressure and knowing that he couldn't answer the question, he put his head in his hands and said, "Oh, poor Fish, you've had it now." As luck would have it, when the dish cover was removed, the dish had fish in it. The Lord was very impressed and asked Fish to get on with the task in hand to find out where the money was. Now, as the fourth servant served Fish, he asked if he could have a word in the kitchen. Fish excused himself and met the gaggle of servants. They admitted that they had stolen the money, and they told him where it was, on the understanding that he kept their identity secret. Fish made his way back to the table. He picked up his book and made a pretence of using it to find the location of the money. He remembered that in the book there was supposed to be a picture of a rooster. He decided to try and find it. In the meantime, one of the servants had come in and hidden themselves in the room, just to make sure that Fish would keep his promise. But Fish had become distracted and was determined to find the picture of the rooster. He started to mutter to himself and became frustrated. "Oh, you rascal," he said out loud. "I know you're in here somewhere." And with that, the servant leapt out of his hiding place and shouted, "He does know everything! It was us! We took the gold!" Fish then told the Lord where the money was. The Lord was so impressed, he told all his friends how capable Fish was. And from that day on, Fish and his wife Gretel ate very fine dinners indeed, and travelled around the village in a grand carriage. Now, I wonder what story I can find for you next time. But you must return next week, for Uncle Flinders will have another one of his stories for you.